Hi, I'm Christian. I am 19 years old and I'm going to be a sophomore at Yale come this fall studying computer science, but I'm originally from Atlanta, Georgia.
All right, so let's start with how you felt when you got the acceptance letter.
I think I felt really happy. I don't know if you noticed based on my content, but I actually got like a likely letter.
Mhm.
Essentially like I was technically informed of my acceptance like a month before I was actually accepted, which was a very surreal experience actually because like I was like really keeping like posted on like admissions information. So Yale actually has like a podcast and they had an episode where they talked about like what likely letters were and how they are like handed out at Yale. So I remember watching that and being like, that would be so cool, but like, am I even gonna get it basically? And then I remember seeing like the email that I got, which was like, it's like really sus. They're like, we have a update your application. Can you like hop on a call with us sometime? And but I kind of knew what had happened because like at that like I knew what was going on. So, but that was really shocking to me because I was like, I felt like I manifested it. But yeah, it was really good. And like same with the acceptances for my other colleges too. Like come Ivy Day, like and that time, like it was honestly more than anything just like relieving because I was really stressed over like the entire process.
I feel like a lot of people nowadays think, and it's like a normal, let's say, I don't know if it's a myth or it's reality, but you can clarify this for us. Does Yale only accept like superhuman teenagers?
I don't think so. There's a very big variety of people that go to school with me, and I feel like of course, it's very context dependent, but I feel like everyone is pretty normal to a certain extent. There's a lot of people that like kind of come off normal, and then you find out they're like super cracked in some way. And I think everyone has something very unique and like that they're passionate about. But like, I feel like there's also people that's just like they're just like normal. Everyone is still great, but it's like do you know what I mean? Like, I don't think it's like an
Like,
impossible bar that they're looking for.
like, would you say they have like a spike?
I don't, there's such a variety. I honestly don't think you can really like place like one archetype for everyone. But I mean, there definitely are some students that have a spike that like are at Yale.
All right, let's talk about your background. Where are you from, and how did you end up at Yale?
Yeah, so I'm from actually a suburb of Atlanta. So I'm like suburb like 30 minutes out called Marietta. And I mean my family is like pretty normal. Maybe you could say like kind of like upper middle class, but I feel like on the lower end of upper middle class. Both my parents actually aren't from Georgia. My dad is from Laos and he immigrated like when he was really young. And then my mom is from Puerto Rico, so she also came to the States like in her 20s when she got with my dad. But yeah, I was born and raised in Marietta, lived there my entire life. For high school, I went to a large public high school with like 2,500 students and um, I was technically in like a magnet program within my high school, which was basically this like STEM program that they had, which was like 500 out of that 200, out of that 2,500. And within that program, it was kind of just like they drew from people like across my county. It was like basically like the kind of like academic STEM kind of part of the school. But throughout high school, I was like, I don't know. I feel like at the beginning of my high school, I was. Wait, do you want me to like go fully into like everything for
Yeah,
this
go.
answer?
Yeah.
Okay. Wait, also, sorry, quick pause. Are you hearing like any notifications coming from me? Because I had a few on
Yeah.
my. Oh, okay, wait. Let me see if I can like mute that. One moment. It's because I don't have my headphones on, so okay. Hopefully that stops it. Anyway, back to what I was saying though. Yeah, I mean, for the longest time, I have been like, since I was a kid, like pretty focused on science. Like that's why I went to a STEM magnet school. I was like mostly interested in physics actually. And also when I was in third grade, I started playing cello. And I mean, like it wasn't something that my parents forced on me, which I feel like, or kind of like guide you into. In my case, like my parents, like no one in my family really did music. I was like, oh, I want to do music just randomly. So I started. That a long time ago. Did it like through the rest of like elementary, middle school, and into high school. So that's like kind of like one of my main things that I feel like I've gotten like pretty decent at, over the years. Come at the beginning of high school though, like with COVID, I honestly was not like really. See, the thing is like, and I have these perspectives because like I go to school and have done programs with people that are like very privileged in the sense of like the reason why I wouldn't say it's So for sure not true with like most or like necessarily like all of the people at my school now, but like there are a lot of people that like from a young age, maybe their parents wanted them to like go to an Ivy League, so they told them they got them to do all of these things and like really help guide them, but like I was not that person. Like from a young age, I actually did want to attend like MIT, but like I didn't like have any guidance on like I didn't even understand like how competitive like college admissions was until like dead ass like maybe like end of sophomore year to like junior year because like I knew I wanted to go to like top school but like I didn't really realize that it was like insanely hard to do in some regards. So because of this like the beginning of high school like I was not necessarily like doing I feel like if I were to have applied at that time like I would not have gone anywhere special. Like I think one of the helpful things was that like my entire high school like I always had really like high grades, like probably averaging like above like 96 out of 100 on my classes and took like hard classes and like took like my tests, did well, like all of that, but like still like I mean like as you know, like that doesn't really it's like the baseline because there's so many people like with those stats that are applying to these top schools and they only have like so many spots. The other thing I was gonna say is that like my high school, because like even though it had this like program, didn't really help people much with admissions whatsoever. Like the college counselors or the counselors, they're not like specifically college counselors, would be over like 500 students or something. Actually, no, maybe like 100 students per counselor. So it's like no one really knew what they were doing with regards to college. Because of that, like going up until like my junior year, like yes, I had cello, which was like one of my strong suits and was like good at academics, but like I didn't really like have a kind of like a lot of good extracurriculars. I just kind of did like random clubs in my school. I did like math team for a year, like debate for a year, like joined like random like honor societies just because I thought I should. There wasn't much thought into it. But come end of my sophomore year, I actually did a program, like a summer program, that was like, and I think this was like my first like legit extracurricular. Which was like I did a it was called like Georgia Governor's Honors Program. So it's like just kind of a summer program in Georgia that like they have for like a lot of like talented students across any subject area basically. And I did it for cello. But this is the first time like I really did like a program like that. It was free. I was meeting so many people because I didn't really have many friends outside of my school at the time. But yeah, like that was really opening my eyes because that was like the first time I'm like, oh, there's all of this stuff out there and I could be wait, sorry, you're buffering on my end. I just want to make sure I'm not frozen for you.
It's good on mine.
Okay, perfect. Anyway, yeah, so this was the time I kind of like had that turning point where I'm like, oh, I can do a lot more. So come that fall is like when I start like really researching college applications. They would have like some colleges visit my school, and so I would start like kind of learning more about the process. And I don't want to say like I thought I was like screwed, but like I did realize like, oh, I have to really lock in. So come this time, what I ended up doing was I also did actually get into this like top youth symphony for orchestra like in my area that I had like literally auditioned for twice before and like gotten rejected. So this was like that was a very cathartic like moment for me into my junior year. But yeah, so I did that. So I feel like it's probably like a little bit confusing just because it's like, so I applied to Yale. Currently, I'm a CS major, but I applied for applied physics and like physics to most of my schools because that's like what I had most experience with in high school, and I didn't really do CS in high school. But basically, the reason I bring that up is because it's like I got a STEM likely letter. I applied for physics, and I'm only talking about like music as of now. But like I honestly didn't really have like that many like locked in physics extracurriculars until like literally like approaching my application because the next thing I kind of did was summer after my junior year into my senior year. So for that summer, I had applied to a few programs, some for music, some for STEM, and I'd seen this dude's video that got into MIT, and he talked about how he did this program called like MITES, which is this like national like MIT program that's for like kind of catered to like underrepresented, underserved people. So I ended up applying, just thinking like, oh, okay, like I'll just work really hard on this application, see where it takes me. I got in, which was honestly such a shock to me because like I had like no real extracurriculars for STEM at that time. And the acceptance rate for that program was like 8%. So that was pretty shocking. The other shocking thing that I had done was or that had happened to me was I had applied for Carnegie Hall's like National Youth Orchestra programs. And they have two that I was eligible for at the time, which is like the top one, like NYO USA, like National Youth Orchestra of the United States of America, and then NYO2, which is a little bit younger. And I had got into NYO2 actually, and that also shocked me. I was like, damn. Because for this program, it's like a very like big like orchestra thing because you get to like one like be with like all the best kids in the country and then also perform at Carnegie Hall and then you get to like tour like across if you're in NYUSA it's like across the world but for us we just went to the Dominican Republic but still like this was all free so this was like a huge opportunity for me like I never thought I would be like performing at Carnegie Hall so that was kind of crazy the one tricky thing is that summer I had to like there was a period where I was because the like for mites the context is that there's like two versions of it there's like a online version that runs through the semester starting in the summer and then there's like the summer program so I did like the online one, partly because like I'd applied to it because I was applying for these orchestra things and wanted to do like two at the same time, which was kind of crazy, but we made it work through that summer. And I feel like those were like my main like big like programs, like shiny things. But as far as like how I like filled out everything else on my application, I think I really just tried to mold myself to this image, which I think is important to like because it's all about branding yourself, you know, like you have to be memorable for like to really like catch admissions officers' eyes. I mean, for every student admitted to any one of these schools, it's like 20 other people rejected. It's tough. So what I ended up doing was I had kind of molded my application around being like a musician and then also doing like physics. So anything related to those two areas, I like really honed in on. So I did like a music tutoring organization too, where I was like tutoring someone for like giving free online lessons, but I also like became like essentially like a recruitment director for that. So that's another like thing I was involved in. And what else? I did a physics internship my fall semester of my senior year. I did some research basically. It wasn't anything significant though, but I did put on my application. On top of that, oh shoot, it's kind of hard to remember honestly, all these things. I was president of two clubs in my school, our like music honor society and then like this other like ambassador program. But yeah, those are kind of like my main extracurriculars because I also already mentioned like my youth orchestra and stuff. I think the other thing that like made my application impressive was like I did come like May before my senior year, I had like grinded. Basically, that was when I started grinding for like my actual applications because I was like, I need to like do a shit ton of research, really like learn as much as I can about the process and about these schools. So I put a lot of work into researching everything. And then actually that's when I started like writing my essays and like I think I was able to craft like pretty compelling narratives about like the person who I am. And I think it's like another part that like made my application kind of stand out too.
Okay. All right. Uh, so let's talk about your grades and stats in that area. So what was your GPA and what were your stat scores?
Yeah, so the context is for my GPA, how my school functioned was like 4.0 scale, except for like APs, it was 5.0 you could go up to, and then for like honors, it was 4.5. So I think I took like 14 AP, like official AP classes, and then like technically there's some more that were like weighted that way, but it's not important. So I had gotten like all A's my entire 4 years, so like my unweighted was 4.0, and my weighted was like I think like 4.697, something like that. But as far as my you asked tests, like SAT and stuff,
Yep.
okay, yeah. So for my SAT, I did a super score. I didn't take the ACT. But for SAT, it was like 70 super score. So I'd taken it the first time, 1540, gotten like 770 in both sections, and the second time I took it and it was like 1560, and I had like 800 in math and like 760 in like the reading and writing.
Okay. Right. Did you get like straight fives on every AP exam?
Yeah, I took 11 AP exams out of the 14 like official AP classes I took, and out of all those exams I got like straight fives.
Okay. And were you like the valedictorian in your class?
Actually, no, and I was pretty far from it because the thing about my school is how it worked was like because I was doing orchestra, like that was like a normal like 4.0. And then like there were people in my school that like were taking all of these hard classes that I was taking too, but weren't doing like any like performing arts or whatever. So like they had higher GPA. So I think out of my entire class of like a little above like 500 people, I was probably like 12 or 13 maybe.
And how did you feel knowing that you weren't the valedictorian and Yale rejects thousands of valedictorians?
I mean, I will say our valedictorian did get into MIT, so I think there is merit to being a valedictorian. But at the same time, like, I don't know, because you could just be like a valedictorian, and this has happened many times before in my school, because something I should have said way earlier is that like my school, like, does not get many exceptions. Like I was the first person in 4 years in my school to be accepted to Yale, and there would be like maybe like 20, 30 people applying each year. And all with good stats. Sometimes these like valedictorians and like they wouldn't get into any schools. So I didn't really feel bad. Like I honestly, and I don't want this to sound any type of way, but like because of like the like types of things I had done and like the way I presented myself, I honestly like knew I deserved to like be going to these schools and getting in. And I think a lot of times like you could be that like valedictorian with like perfect grades and perfect test scores, but like if you don't have like an interesting story, like I feel like schools like there's so many people applying, so it's like they have to make a choice.
Keep talking about like a good narrative and a good story. Like, how would a person who's in high school, just starting out, start to build that story that makes admissions officers stop and pay attention?
Yeah, so I think there is a lesson to be learned from everything I've talked about in my story, which is that
Hmm.
like I was honestly really lucky, I think, in that I already had like cello as something to fall back on, and then like I had gotten to these like good programs, but that's not something that like will for sure happen. So the smart thing to do is from the beginning of high school, kind of have an idea of like what you want to focus on, and this is what I have said online like so many times because like I mean because sometimes people will tell you explore in high school, but I honestly don't think it's a good idea because you really aren't locked into anything you do in high school. Like you have college to explore. So honestly, I think the best thing to seem appealing is to kind of like pick something that like you won't hate doing and really just like focus on that. But also like it has to both be like, I think the sweet spot is like something that like you like to a certain extent, something that like you can be good at enough to like be distinguishable within that 4 years too. That's the advice I would give because there's many things that like people do in high school, such as like be president of like whatever school club that like everyone does. So if you really want to do something distinguishable, you have to like do something different or do that thing that everyone does to such a high level that it makes you distinguishable. But that's going to be hard to do usually unless like you already have experience in that.
Right. Moving on. What's the one answer that you think made Yale admissions officers stop and pay attention?
I think actually it is mites because, and I did mention my admissions file on my account because I am like giving it away again. But basically, I read my admissions file. This was like fall of freshman year last year. And literally, like my second reader, who I think was probably the one responsible most for like getting me that likely letter, like he had written that was the only extracurricular mentioned anywhere on my admissions file. Like people like they were like talking about that extracurriculars like physics, cello, whatever. But like mites was the only like specific name. The comment had been something like when he was talking about like the possibility of like giving me a likely was like oh like mites is like a nice like feather in his cap. So I think because it's such like a honestly like a feeder program, like a lot of the people I did that program with are all going to top schools like Harvard, Princeton, like
Yeah,
MIT,
I
whatever.
interviewed a girl as well.
Like
Like,
yeah, there's a few with me at Yale.
she
Not
also.
too many, but there's a few. Because it's not a huge program. It was like maybe like the total cohort between like both like semester and the summer program is like 300 people maybe or something.
Okay, like I feel like there's a narrative going on as well that Yale loves leadership. So did you have any leadership positions?
Yeah, I think I did. I had leadership like within my school in those two clubs I was president of,
Mm-hmm.
as well as like in I guess kind of in a way in that organization that I had been doing, which is called the Do Re Mi Project, the music tutoring. And I also technically had sort of a leadership position in my like youth symphony. So those were all things that like I talked about on my like extracurricular section. I don't know if I had like I don't think like leadership was that thing in my application that like was distinctive that I was like this is my main thing, but it was present for sure.
I think another question would be like, with all these activities and everything, what did your actual schedule look like during junior year?
Yeah, so in high school, like, I think it varied. I mean, like, definitely varied a lot. I honestly don't feel like they took up that much of my time because most of them, like, most of the things I was doing that were like club type, which is like that music tutoring and then like all the clubs I did in my school were like pretty much like I wouldn't have to commit that many hours per week. It would be like maybe one time during the week I sit down and I work on this. I guess I did have to tutor that like cello kid like a good little bit, but excuse me. I guess the only other like regular commitment I really had was like my youth symphony. which I would do every weekend. But other than that, I just like I probably spent a lot of time like studying and like well not really studying, but just like doing my work and things like that. But I still definitely like had a lot of like free time to have fun during high school. Like even though I was like locked in and focused, like I wasn't like not having fun at all.
So like if you had to say like what did you sacrifice to get into Yale?
Yeah, I think if anything, I honestly don't feel like I personally had to sacrifice that much because I really love my experience. Like all of these things I talked about, like my youth orchestra, all these summer programs, like even though they're things that helped me, like I thoroughly enjoyed all of them. Like they're all really fun, met lots of people, had a lot of fun. So the most thing I would say I sacrificed probably is like I think I was focused on my work in a sense like for example like I would be in class and like we have free time and we're not doing anything like I was a person that I would be out there like getting ahead on the work so that like I could spend my other time doing things like working on my college essays and like whatnot. But I think it's a good way to like reconcile like the work with like fun maybe by doing it with friends and stuff. But I still am of the belief though that like there is a certain extent to like where you do need to sacrifice like I think in my case it didn't apply that much honestly, but in the sense of like sacrifice exploring whatever you want to do for fun for focusing on something that will like actually make you stand out. And the best situation is I guess like me where like I enjoy doing the thing that I focused on. But yeah.
I guess follow-up would be how much sleep were you getting during peak Yale prep session?
So are you, this is like when I'm applying or like throughout high
Yeah.
school? Yeah. Honestly, don't remember that well, which is really bad. But I think I was doing pretty good. Like maybe like 7, 8 hours. Like there would always be like those nights where like I would be like having a lot of work or something, and it would be like a lot less. But like most of the time, like I think I was getting above 6.
Okay, so it was not that bad.
Yeah, it wasn't bad.
All right, let's shift gears real quick. Can we discuss your Common App essay and what was it about?
Yeah, so my Common App essay was actually really personal, and the reason why I did this was partly for the fact that like I feel like because I knew my extracurriculars were already quite good and like everything else on my application was appealing, I was like, I might as well just like talk about something really personal to me that's like important to my story. What my essay was about was really identity, and like if I could summarize in a sentence, it's about like my journey of going from someone who was really uncomfortable and didn't like my identity and was insecure to someone who is really like positive and embracing it through like going outside of my comfort zone essentially. So what I talked about to be more specific was like growing up like I really like was insecure about like being a person of color honestly. Like I dead ass like wanted to be white, and I literally talked about that in my essay. Like I actually said that, and it was very specific too. I would talk about like things that I did, like, and I also talked about other things I was insecure about, like my sexuality. I'm gay, so that was something I mentioned like in my essay, and essentially like I'm really insecure. And then I will say you don't want to make an essay a sob story entirely. That can be a good intro. So that was just the first part, but what I talked about for the rest of the essay was about essentially how like after that program I talked about, GHP, that was such a turning point in my life where I finally like I was away from home, so I really like was like, what if I just like did all of these things that made me uncomfortable and went out of my comfort zone? Things like, just being open about like who I am as a person in terms of like sexuality. Like if I saw something that scared me, like an opportunity, which could be like literally like talking to a new person, literally just going out there and like doing it anyway. And I think I talked about how like that was the thing that actually made me go from like being insecure to being really confident, or at least being the type of person who embraces who he is. And I talked about like how through that, like that made me really realize that like the physical things that I was insecure about talking about in the beginning of the essay were actually like things that I'm proud about because of like what they represent in my family and like the qualities of like my, what's the word? Like, I guess family, but my like family members, my relatives, yeah.
So like walk us through like how many completely different essay topics did you cycle through before finding this one?
I don't know exactly, but ballpark maybe like 5-ish that I use in most of my applications. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's one about, I mean, we can count my personal statement as one. There's one where I talked about like how people in my family like didn't really have the opportunity to pursue uh like higher education all the time. in terms of like becoming like an academic. And I say that because like I had an uncle, basically what it's actually about, who he passed and literally like he was the only person in my family that like also liked physics, but he never really had like the opportunity to pursue it essentially. Talked about the ways like that impacted me and like how I grew from that. And then also one where I had one I talked about cello, but I didn't use that and my personal journey with it. I didn't use that for every college though. Actually, but I did talk about cello in a lot of my a lot of but yeah, there's that. Sorry, this is really hard for me to remember. Um, then there is one like I guess like the why what college that I kind of did for every college where I talked about like the physics major and like whatever like music and whatever opportunities I had. And I had one specifically too about like what I was interested in terms of physics was specifically like quantum computation. So like that's another thing I talked about. And I had some like various miscellaneous essay topics that like maybe like 5 to 10, probably closer to five more that were just like random ones that like other colleges would end up having.
Let's talk about supplemental essays. Which one made you panic the most?
Made me panic the most. Honestly, I feel like it would be those ones at schools where they weren't like the typical ones where they would be like trying to do something different, and that those were not, like the ones where I felt less confident. And honestly, like those were a lot of schools like I didn't get accepted. I would say like things like U Chicago to have like their really like weird prompts. A lot of like I know Harvard and Stanford had a like roommate essay.
Yeah.
Like those I feel like are less like there's less of like a format to follow maybe. So like I think those were the ones that made me like more scared.
Okay. For the why Yale essay, how do you write about wanting to go to Yale without just saying it's an Ivy League, it's prestigious and stuff like
Yeah, what you have to talk about is this is where research comes in. So I did so much research. I would like go to look like I would look on the admissions website, see that they had some like random online webinar going on, and I would join those. I would scroll through like the department pages I was interested in, finding like labs that like I was like, oh, their work is interesting, finding classes. So that's what I wrote about. Like I wrote about like the kind of and aspect of Yale, which is a little like corny because like low-key everyone writes about that. But I did talk about how it applied specifically to like the things I was interested, which was mainly like quantum computation and like cello. I mentioned like within the like 125 words, I mentioned like many specific like clubs at Yale, like some people I wanted to like research with, different opportunities, and like I think that's what made it strong.
that. Like, when did you start writing your essays?
I started May before my freshman year. Sorry, May before my senior year.
Also, like, how do you be vulnerable and authentic while still trying to impress the admissions officers?
I mean, I think it's all about reflection in the sense of like part of the reason of your part of what admissions officers are looking for is like think about it. Like there's 20 other people they could accept. Why would they accept you? Because you're a person that can really contribute to the culture and the like academics at the school. And part of what makes you that person is if you're a person that can really like learn from the experiences you've already had in life and kind of reflect not only on that, but also what you're going to do at that school, how you're going to contribute based on what you've already experienced and what you've learned from those experiences. So really it's about like I think it just requires a lot of like introspection and reflection before you write, which is something I low-key just had already done a lot in my life because I think about things a lot honestly and like my life purpose. I knew like one of like the biggest things that had happened to me was becoming a lot more comfortable in my identity. So I was like, this is a very core part of my identity. And I think it's, you kind of have to have a vision of like, okay, this is the person who I am. This is everything that makes me me and how I view life, my perspectives, whatnot. Have like you could literally write a physical list of like all these things you want to talk about to admissions officers and then like mold that into each application such that like it's distributed between your essays and like I think really just like being able to talk about who you are as a whole while also having that like kind of like brand maybe is how you can like both be impressive in one way and then also be vulnerable and authentic as to like who you are and like what's really down beneath that like surface.
Were you like scared to include something because you thought it might like hurt your chances?
That's a good question. I'm honestly not super sure. Was I? Sorry, this is like a little bit long ago for me. Um, I See, I'm honestly like pretty vulnerable normally, so I wasn't really that scared to like include anything probably with the personal side of things, I would say. And then about specific, yeah, honestly don't think I was really scared in particular about anything to include.
Like, did you ever catch yourself exaggerating or making something sound more dramatic than it actually was?
I think in some ways there is a certain level of like embellishment you have to do where it's like
Mm-hmm.
I don't say like exaggerate like stories of things that actually happen, but like kind of like portray the reality in such a way that it is compelling. Um, I think the most like direct exaggerate or embellishment I probably did was like in my like extracurriculars and honors, which is just about like I don't think it's about like lying. It's about like taking the parts that are like impressive. Like you could say like well, like in my symphony, technically I was like a student leader. I was part of that group, so like I would like include that in my like tagline of like this is my position. When in reality, like low key, like as the student leaders, like we didn't actually end up doing that much stuff. So I think it's just like putting it in a way that seems like unique.
Okay, let's talk about recommendation letters. How long do you think you spent building relationships with teachers before asking for letters? And like, how are you supposed to approach that?
So my best advice on this is to I feel like this sounds crazy, but like just be like a good student like from the first place and like actually like build relationships with your teachers regardless. Because like I think it would be really easy to know if something is performative, especially if it's like you just like got like this is even after you've already been in that teacher's class. So my two recommendations was my one of my math teachers and then one of my like my A push teacher. So my math teacher, the thing is I actually had him twice. I had him in ninth grade and 11th grade. So I think I changed so much during that time. I was like he definitely like has seen me come out of my shell. So that's why I chose him because I was like, yeah, like and then also like in his class, like I would be I think we had a relationship because like not only like first of all, I probably had the highest grade in that class. Everyone had highest grades, yet I was the only person out here. We'd have like an optional kind of like homework every day, and I would be the only person like talking, asking questions about it, and I like sat at the front and stuff like every day when I probably didn't even need to. And then also like literally, I just remember like he would ask questions. He would like every Monday or something, he'd be like, "Oh, like what everyone do over the weekend, like whatnot." And I would always answer because I always like. I mean, I'm a very talkative person. I like to just yap. So I mean, like I kind of do that anyway. But I think just like really like actually like showing effort. Because like imagine you're a teacher and then like none of your students talk to you. Like wouldn't you be so bored? So like I feel like seeing them as human and like actually interacting with them on that level is like a good way to like develop a relationship as you would with any person otherwise. But my other recommendation, I was in her class and just like there were a few times I put like a lot of extra effort into like really getting the high score on like tests and stuff, and I think she noticed that by like the way I would study. And then also like I don't know, I just remember she would like she had sent me like some messages over like her communication platform, literally being like, "Oh, your assignment like made my day. It was like so good." So like I just knew like we had the like good like relationship. So that's also why I chose her for like my humanities type rec.
Okay. And like for counselors, how did you make sure yours wasn't just generic praise?
Yeah, low key, I think it probably was generic because at my school, like no one, the counselors were so overloaded with like disciplinary stuff that they didn't really have like no one really knew their counselors like that or ever met with them. I only started once I did college because I had a few concerns about like some things. So, at our school, we had to fill out like a brag sheet where you would like write a lot about yourself. So I just like really yapped and talked about like everything just to make sure that like that my counselor like really knew everything. I think she did her best with that. But yeah, it kind of was what it was. I don't think that was one of my strong points though, based on also what I read in my admissions file.
Okay, and like how far in advance like did you ask for recommendations?
I don't remember exactly, but it was probably like beginning of like senior year, maybe. Something like that.
All right, let's talk about awards and honors. Let's go through your awards and honors section. Like, what's the most impressive sounding award that's actually not hard to?
Honestly, my awards weren't that impressive
Mm-hmm.
because like I don't think I did like many competition type stuff during high school. So I put all the impressive stuff, which were really my like I put them like in activities, even if there were things that like people sometimes put in honors because like I feel like I wanted to be able to talk about them because you have like more words. So the only honors I had was like I had gotten like the National Merit Scholarship for like my PSAT scores. At the time I applied, I was like semifinalist, so I put that. I had gotten also for my PSAT scores recognition from College Board, like it's like National Hispanic Recognition something, so I put that there too. And I had a few other awards like at my school, like different like they call them like letters, like academic letter. community service letter for like those types of things. Those weren't really impressive. Only other things I put there was honor societies that I did in my school. Like I was like president of the English one for a year. I did like what else? Science honor society, and then like just a general like national honor society. But I also was involved in what else? I got like an award for um being like top 5% of my class, and I put that there because like my school actually doesn't report rank unless you are like valedictorian or like salutatorians. I think that was the part where I could like at least like prove that I had like some good rank within my school. Yeah, I think those are all my yeah, I think it's everything I remember.
Did you have like weak spots that you were nervous about in your application?
I mean, potentially those awards, but honestly, like, not I don't feel like I had anything in particular. Maybe just the fact that like a lot of the stuff I started kind of later in high school, but it's not like I could really do anything about it at that time. So I tried my best, but I wasn't really that worried about it. And then also like the schools I didn't get into because like maybe I got into like half of the schools I applied to. To be fair, like almost all the schools I applied to were like under 10% acceptance rate. But I feel like it really just is a game of like, okay, maybe you're the most cracked person in the world, or you have an extremely compelling story and you'll get into like every school you apply to. Other than that, I'm of the opinion that like there is a certain caliber of person who will get into like a top five school or an Ivy, but you can't guarantee to a specific school because there is a certain level of randomness.
I totally understand that. Yeah. All right. What's the biggest myth about getting into Yale that needs to die?
I don't know if there's a specific myth about getting into Yale, but I think broadly over college admissions into like these top schools, the biggest myth is like the way a lot of these like kind of like admissions influencers portray that like you need to like be like super cracked in every regard, and even like these people that are like super cracked that like started a company that is at $1 million and like have perfect scores on everything don't get in. Like I think it's more about like the actual like genuineness of like how you want to get into school, what you want to do with that, your story, and all those things that matters. And I feel like people are so like thirsty over getting into these schools that they kind of forget like what the whole point is.
So, like, what would be like the one thing you would change about the how students approach applications?
I think, sorry, I don't know if you hear that siren. The one thing I would change about how students approach, kind of related to my last answer, I really think like I don't know, just from my impression of like, I don't think this is true of like a lot of the people that got into Yale, but like seeing the kind of like college admissions discourse online, I feel like the angle that people approach applications a lot of time really just like isn't genuine. Also from people that reach out to me, it's really, I feel like it comes from a place of like, oh, I want to like get into this prestigious school because it's prestigious, not because of like, I really appreciate this opportunity that it has for my major and like this is what I would do with like all the opportunities I'm given. And I think that leads people to like do things that like is just not like what actually is gonna get them in. I think it's a misleading sort of rhetoric.
I think this was it. Like, what advice would you have for people looking to apply to somewhere like Yale?
So for my like specific advice, I would just say, if you're a freshman or younger, essentially what I said earlier, which is like find a passion and get really good at it to the point that you're distinguishable. And then also kind of like reflect on like the person who you are and like your beliefs and perspectives. But also, if you're actually like in that stage where you're now kind of applying, think about like how you're going to brand yourself because that's really what it's about. So be really intentional with that. Do a lot of research on all these schools you're applying to and start early, literally like as early as I did, or I would honestly recommend like low key like beginning of your spring semester of your junior year because then you'll be able to relax a lot more throughout the fall, knowing that like you have already done a lot of the work and you can kind of chill.
Perfect. Thank you so much for joining us.
But of
Pleasure
course,
talking with you.
I try my best to be helpful. I just like I feel like there's a lot of like I don't say misinformation, but just like in my opinion, unguided types of opinions on college applications. So I try my best to be like super real
Yes,
about it.
yes.